I'm going to rehydrate some old ink pads today. Let me show you how. Come on in. Layered with Senior Susie stamps. I got a call a couple of weeks ago about coming over and getting some stamping supplies from a lady that was getting ready to move. And, you know, of course I hesitated because I have a large collection here, but I went anyway and got a lot of really nice things. So I wanted to go kind of through that with you a little bit today and talk about it. First of all, I'm using some disinfectant wipes from that I got from Amazon. And this little stamp pad, Mellow Moss, is one that I don't have, and it looked much worse than this one, this old olive one. And they're fairly easy to clean up with these little wet wipes if you get some that are in this kind of condition. Now, these were stored in a basement situation for about 11 years. And so we don't know what kind of condition the ink is in, but this is the way I feel about it. The likelihood of me being able to put some water back on the stamp pad and use it is high, because this is all water-based ink and it will reactivate with water spritz. It may not be perfect, but in my studio I don't desire perfection out of everything. Now, there's some things I do, don't get me wrong. And I guarantee I will go through probably the whole case of disinfecting wipes on this collection that I got. There's another old olive one, and it'll clean up nicely as well. It doesn't have the additional ink dribble on it. You know, sometimes when you store your ink pads in some other fashion than flat, they tend to kind of run out this way a little bit sometimes. And if you over ink them, if you're refilling the ink on them, that can be a bit of a challenge as well. Let's see, this is Brilliant Blue. So that's what I'm going to do before I open up all of them. Here's a white one, and it's got a little glitter on it. So let me finish wiping these off, and then we'll come back and see after 11 years just what kind of condition these are going to be in. So bear with me for a few minutes. Okay, now for about, I don't know, 10 minutes worth of cleanup here. This is really the only one that has any staining on it, and I can probably work at that a little bit more. So let's see if these old 10 or 11-year-old stamp pads, I don't know if you can see this or not. Let's see. You can see how it's kind of bowed in there in the middle, and I suspect it's dry. Let's test it and see. It's still working, but it is a little dry. So what I'm going to do with these now, this is just plain water. And I'm going to give these a little fine spritz. And then I'm going to shut them up and let them rehydrate upside down so that water goes down into the stamp pad. You can generally tell if a stamp pad has been kind of gently used a little bit. Now, this one's probably seen a little more use as a Christmas stamp, but let's just see. The ink's good on it still. It's amazing to me, after 11 years, here we are. I'm going to put a little hydration on that one as well, because the felt on that pad is not standing up uniformly. And again, I'm just going to turn it so that the water soaks in. This will help rehydrate these pads. And I mean, the ink is the ink that's there. So if you hydrate your pad, it helps spread the ink on an old pad like this. That's a pretty blue, isn't it? So I guess my point is, if you have somebody call you and say, hey, I've got some old supplies here, just because they're old, well, I was going to spray that, just because they're old, don't discount their value, because these are beautiful colors and they're very, very usable in your studio. And maybe you don't care for this color, for example, but perhaps you have a friend that is new to stamping and doesn't have a lot of ink colors. Well, here we go. Let's do it. This is a cranberry color. It's almost kind of akin to a brownish color, but it was a brand new ink pad, never had been opened. And this is Mellow Moss. Now this pad appears to be really dried up, but I don't know if you can see or not. Let's see if I can get the light on it. Just see how the ink has just kind of dried up. Let's see if it'll even stamp. I suspect it won't. It's pretty sad, but we're going to try it anyway. I'm going to put a lot of water on this, and you can see how much water that actually is going onto these ink pads. And I'm going to leave it this way and let the water soak down in there, and then I'm going to try it again after a while. So I got ink on my fingers, and I'll bet I've got ink in all those pads too. So I'll come back in a day and we'll finish this video up. Okay, now I've gone back and opened all these ink pads up and stamped another image out of them. And you can see how nice and vibrant these colors are. I used the strawberry this time so that we could tell the difference between it and the little apple. The strawberry has a little bit more detail on it. And all of these colors are much more vibrant than they were in the original stamp. Now this is that Mellow Moss, and this was the image that I got out of it after I watered it the first time. And I've gone back on this one. I noticed that it was a pigment ink. All of the rest of them are water-based. So I went back with a little piece of scrap and went over the top and kind of loosened up that crusty top, and I've added water in twice more. But you can see the top now looks much better, and the ink pad has hydrated up again here much better than it was, so the foam has swelled back up. Now this is one of those linen top pads, so let's do another little stamp on this one since I've worked on it a little bit more, and just see. It may very well be that this is not a keeper, but it's making good images. Looks like I might have a thread on my... I think once this sets and finishes the hydration process, this stamp pad's going to be just fine too. Yeah, that's a perfectly good image. What do you think? Some of them are a little bit wet because I added some water to the stamp pad again about an hour ago. So out of all of these stamp pads, this one's kind of questionable. All the rest of them work beautifully. That one old olive that was so cruddy. I worked on it for a while and just pitched it because it wasn't worth fooling with. See how nice that white pigment ink rehydrated. And then let's look at this vintage violet. That's the one that had the little concave, and you can see it's still sunk in there in the middle a little bit, so I believe this pad could take a little more water for sure. Now, before I go, I just wanted to mention one little last thing. These ink pads that you think about rehydrating are only as good as the amount of ink that's left in them. See, some people don't use their ink pads very much. Look, that's just a beautiful image off of that, and it's a really pretty color. So I probably will, over the next week, add a little more water in here just to hydrate that felt pad that's in there. And then this is a perfectly good stamp pad for me in my studio. At any rate, I hope this has kind of given you a little idea about maybe looking at some of the stamp pads that you have in your collection and seeing if perhaps they are worth rehydrating. The other thing that you can do on a stamp pad, now not the pigment ink stamp pad, but I've done before, is choose a stamp pad, and then if I can't get the re-inker in Buckaroo Blue, for example, I might be able to get a re-inker in Marina Mist, and it would go on top of this ink pad, and it will blend with the old ink in there. The pad's perfectly usable, but if the ink in the pad has been used up, you can ink it down with a different color ink that's very close to this and have a very usable ink pad just for the expense of an ink refill. So that's a thought for you. I hope this little demonstration has given you something to think about, and maybe will help you if somebody calls and says, hey, I've got some stuff over here. At any rate, have a great weekend. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.